that matter, that you have an advocacy against graft and corruption. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Your Honor, please.
May I know at what point in your career as a lawyer did you start your advocacy against graft and corruption?
Now, way back from day one, after being admitted to the practice of law and my encounter with some of my hearings in our regular courts, and thereafter upon my onboarding with the Department of the Interior and Local Government, I started to develop a vision that graft and corruption is really a menace, something that basically erodes public confidence to the government, and one particular jinx now for this country to move forward, Your Honor. So I do believe that in the many experiences that I did encounter in the department and during those times that I was in the practice of law, I have been put in a position that at least one way or the other, I want myself to have an impact role in at least eradicating or reversing the onslaught or this tide of corruption, Your Honor.
Have you brought this advocacy to your position now as, or to your position in the Department of Local Government?
Yes, Your Honor. As a matter of fact, I have always been applying this particular advocacy in every deliverables that we are required by the department to consider and to address. Now, we are very particular in ensuring that public trust is never sacrificed, because we always adhere to that injunction in Section 1 of Article 11 of the Philippine Constitution, that being in the government is an accountability, Your Honor.
Okay. So you have been with the DILG for several years now, and part of the mandate of the Department of Interior and Local Government is to investigate and recommend administrative sanctions against mayors. No? Now, as we all know, Mayor Magalong has repeatedly highlighted how corrupt practices among mayors and local government officials inflate project costs. What have you done in your capacity as Undersecretary to address this concern of Mayor Magalong?
Well, as of now, Your Honor, we are still trying to collect now essential data on the ground, because the mandate of the department is not basically that ostentatious or extensive as that of the Office of the Ombudsman, but he is already placed in the radar of the department. We cannot just tolerate now this kind of compromises that are being brought by dishonest politicians now that lead to the ghost or the non-delivery of essential projects and services to the people. So we're just trying to collect more data based from submissions that are emanating from our regional directors or regional offices. And once we are basically provided now with this solid data and all other needed information, then probably we can submit a concept note to the Secretary and the corresponding authority for us to start a more standard procedure in at least aligning our actions with the vision and the concept of the good Mayor Magalong from Baguio City, Your Honor.
Are you familiar with the Pharmally scandal?
Well, not that much, Your Honor.
In any case, and for my final question, if you had been ombudsman during the time of President Duterte, what would you have done differently?
Well, despite the investigation being done by the Committee of Congress, I think it is well within the power of the Ombudsman to start and to conduct its own investigation. So this is clear in the mandate, and I think the Office of the Ombudsman has the necessary complement or personnel. It can even put up or establish a fact-finding bureau, and we can even take over the investigation being conducted or being done by Congress, because this is well within the authority and the power of the Ombudsman. I think the Office of the Ombudsman as the graft body and the protector of the people could have been more impactful if only the Office of the Ombudsman nosedive into the nitty-gritty of the problems brought about by this formal scandal. Well, if I were in that place during that time, I could have basically navigated a different trajectory, because I do believe that this scandal is something of monumental proportion that the Ombudsman is capable of cracking, Your Honor.
Thank you. As I said, that was my final question. Good luck, Yusek.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you, Attorney Mejia. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Justice Erlinda Piñera Uy.
Thank you, Attorney Cuevas. Good afternoon, Yusek Benitez.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
You are currently Undersecretary of the Department of Local Government.
That is correct, Your Honor.
What do you handle?
I have the legal, the external, and the legislative liaison portfolio, Your Honor.
Can you briefly describe the nature of your work?
Well, collectively, I provide legal counseling to the Secretary. Now, almost the entire gamut of the legal demands and the deliverables of the department are placed within my control and within my authority. I review contracts, I review policy formulations before these are brought to the Secretary for his imprimatur or approval. Now, I also perform some legal liaisoning, like, for example, in those instances wherein fact-finding investigations are being conducted by the department, then we do file cases at the end of that engagement, and I usually sign for and in behalf of the department under the authority given unto me by the Secretary, Your Honor, please. So basically, I also attend congressional hearings because that is part and conduit of legislative works, Your Honor. So that means articulating the positions of the department when it comes to bills formulation, and at least providing for whatever stand the department entertains on an issue that both houses of Congress are interested with, Your Honor, please.
I see. So how has these professional experiences prepared you for the investigative and prosecutorial responsibilities of the Ombudsman if you should be appointed?
Well, these experiences have really taught me a lot, now to say the least, Your Honor, because I have seen in the process of my attendance in those engagements that the problems of the Philippines can be addressed if they are taken care of using the proper procedures that the law provide in favor of any particular agency of the government. So gravitating towards the Office of the Ombudsman, Your Honor, I do believe that if ever I will be appointed, now many of those investigations and controversies being investigated and all other issues cropping up as part of our problems can be taken care of and be addressed by the Office of the Ombudsman, Your Honor.
From your perspective as an official of the DILG, have you encountered any form of corruption at the local government level? And if yes, how would you address them if appointed as Ombudsman?
Yes, Your Honor, please. If only I can have the liberty of articulating some experiences in the department, I have been privy to some internal indications of graft and corrupt practices, and even those from the outside, particularly in the local government units that we are supervising, Your Honor, like the proliferation of illegalities in the LGUs, the tolerance and the conspiracy perpetrated by the local chief executives with some of those who thrives in the corruption business. Now, these are things that I was privy to and was able to witness, and which, if ever, this representation will be given the chance now to lead the graft body, I will start an honest, a no-nonsense, and a new version of investigatory works leading to prosecution, if only for us to be able to help this government rid with its perennial problem of graft and corruption, Your Honor.
How do you define moral courage in public office? And can you cite an instance in your career when you had to make an unpopular but principled decision?
All right. Moral courage for me is something or a characteristic that makes you defend a position now which you believe is consistent with law. So it has no discordant experiences with any of our rules and regulations, and one which is practically aligned or consistent with the rule of law. Now, as an official of the government and as a member of the Philippine Bar, I always adhere in the concept and in the supremacy of the rule of law, Your Honor, please. And even if I do encounter some problems with my superior insofar as an issue is concerned, and for which I believe I can defend a position based on legal and most especially on moral ground, then I will not hesitate, Your Honor, in putting forward that recommendation and that action of mine.
Any actual experience?
Well, there are some decisions in the department that I am not very comfortable about, Your Honor, please, especially in the crafting of legal opinions and policies of the department. So if I do believe that these policies are something that run counter to the rule of law and to some of the prescriptions or the intercalations of the Supreme Court, now I just explain this in a manner that I will not compromise the superior and the subordinate relationship. And there are cases wherein I would ask my boss that if I could not sign it or something that I cannot lend my assent to it, then for me that is already a proper way of recognizing that my point has been taken into consideration. But of course, I cannot insist on something where my authority will not permit me to insist on something. I can raise some objection and I can tell them the reason and the value of my objection, Your Honor.
And what happens if your objection is not adopted?
There were times where I didn't get the promotion, Your Honor.
If appointed, what measures will you implement to address case backlog and ensure speedy resolution of cases at the Ombudsman?
All right. If ever I would be given the privilege of being the Ombudsman, Your Honor, I will rely on three visions vis-a-vis the forward direction of the Office of the Ombudsman. One is I envision to establish a transformative ombudsman. Now, I also endeavor to develop a technology-driven ombudsman and an ombudsman which is trustworthy. Now, insofar as the backlog of cases now is concerned, now this is something that I must address internally. So, one, we really have to determine what is the reason for the backlog and what are the factors that lead to the backlog of these cases. So, I'll have to consider points wherein I have to determine accountability and even the possibility of reward. Now, I dream of retooling the entire workforce of the Office of the Ombudsman, particularly on the part of our GRAP investigation officers, because somehow I do believe, Your Honor, that the problem emanates from our investigation officers. So I'll have to tell them that the Office of the Ombudsman is constitutionally protected, it is independent, no, it is beholden to no one. No, it is the champion of the people, and it acts as the preserver of the integrity of public service. I really have to instill a new value formation on the part of our GRAP investigation officers. And then I'm also thinking, Your Honor, of addressing or determining possible choke points. Now, I've been hearing stories about parking fees and all other illegalities. Now, as part of the internal malady in the GRAP body, but this is something that has been the subject of insinuations that I still have to prove. But given the chance that I would be able to prove this, Your Honor, then I will waste no time of weeding out or eradicating the perpetrators of this illegal practice. Now, by and large, the resources of the Office of the Ombudsman and its capacity to address its deliverables now will really depend on an honest-to-goodness management of the GRAP body or the Bureau of the Office, Your Honor.
Can you cite what specific aspect of the Ombudsman, because you mentioned your short-term plan, if appointed, are those which are anchored on achieving a transformative office. What specific areas do you wish to transform?
All right. I intend to at least introduce some reforms in the manner by which deliverables are addressed in the Office of the Ombudsman. Now, in the department, in a very short time that I was heading a particular unit in the department, I relied on rotating the members of the unit or the office in order to avoid familiarity and in order for me to be able to enhance efficiency. Because I believe that familiarity breeds contempt, and I also recognize the fact that if they are not being rotated and made to address or take on challenges that are outside of their usual undertakings, then their concept of development can no longer be rekindled. So I plan to do a rotation of these members of my team. I will also install a digital concept of managing the office, wherein for every week I will be requiring them to submit their deliverables in accessible digital form so that I can monitor the progress and pinpoint possible liability and also corresponding granting of incentive now through that particular way of having that platform, Your Honor. I also intend to lessen the number of signatories when it comes to decisions and draft actions being forwarded to the Office of the Ombudsman. I did notice that from one in-craft investigation officer, it goes to the director, then it goes to the assistant ombudsman, then it goes to the deputy ombudsman, then finally to the Office of the Ombudsman. So somehow we have to cut the back now in order to address efficiency and lessen the timetable, now leading to a more expeditious deliverable now to the demands of the office. I also intend to calibrate the workforce and find out if there are excesses until I'm finally able to achieve a certain number of efficiency that can help me totally in this fight of addressing the problems of the GRAP body. Joanna, please.
That was my last question, Yusek. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much, Joanna.
Thank you, Justice Uy. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Attorney Nesauro H. Firme.
Thank you, Attorney Marifel. Good afternoon, Yusek.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Actually, I was asked by Senator. We were asked by the Senator, Senator Alan, to ask this question. No? What is your position on the lifestyle check?
So, lifestyle check is a very vital way of determining whether some politicians or public servants are engaged in illegalities or unusual activities, to say the least. But plain lifestyle check, for me, is not enough. Now, there should be a way forward after this lifestyle check has been taken care of. Because merely determining whether there is a misproportion or whether there is discrepancy in the income of one public servant vis-a-vis now his regular earnings now will not be very meaningful if we can translate this into more or into something more tangible. So what I am saying here, Your Honor, is that now outside of the lifestyle check is okay for me as a preliminary step at this point in time, but it has to lead into a more tangible procedure or process for us to be able to understand the problem and finally weed out the cause of this problem, Your Honor.
Yeah, so I'll ask my own set of questions. By the way, Yusek, you started your career, in government career in DILG.
Yes, Your Honor, that is correct.
You were in DILG as early as when?
I started in 1996, Your Honor.
1996, okay. So first question, Yusek, no, if appointed as the ombudsman, as the next ombudsman, what can the stakeholders expect from you?
Number one, I promise an independent ombudsman. An ombudsman that is freed from political influences and possible domination or interferences from official dom. I promise to provide them an ombudsman which is going to work in accordance with its mandate and run the agency with that purpose of eradicating or abating corruption. Because corruption, Your Honor, is really a menace in society. It is not only a case of ascertaining somebody who did something wrong. It is more of a systemic problem that we can address if we can have an ombudsman which is truly independent.
Despite all your accomplishments in the DILG, Yusek, why do you still want to become the ombudsman?
Well, for me, this is the closest and the nearest by which I can lend or provide an altruistic contribution to my country. It may sound a little bit, unorthodox, but I always believe that in this final episode of my life, maybe I'm now 65, Your Honor, and probably now I can still compute 1 decade out of my existence. I'm still craving and longing for an impact in society. And this particular impact is something that I can realize if I will be in a position now which is devoid of any control from the politicians, a position which under the fundamental law is protected, and a position which owes its existence now to public faith and public trust, Your Honor. So I do believe that this would be the reason why I'm still yearning and longing to serve my country by being the next ombudsman, Your Honor.
So you became Director 4 in 2022, correct? And that is a presidential appointee.
2022 was already my second appointment as Director 4, Your Honor, please.
So prior to that, you were
I was also appointed Director 4 in 2018 by the
Okay.
former President, Francisco Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Then I also served in an OIC capacity or acting capacity as head of the legal during the time of Secretary Anyo and then Officer in Charge Catalino Cuy, Your Honor. So officially, I was appointed Director 4 now by 2 presidents, one in 2018, the other one is in 2022.
Thank you for giving me that info. My next question is, since you were appointed by 2 presidents, how apolitical are you?
I'm still a political, Your Honor. I started in the department occupying the lowest level of an attorney position. I started as an attorney 2. I climbed up to 3. I climbed up to 4, then 5, then I became OIC, then I became finally a full-fledged Director 4, then I was recommended by then Secretary Abalos to the President as Assistant Secretary, and finally I was recommended by Secretary John Vic Rimulya to President Marcos as Undersecretary of the Department. Now, just to be very transparent with Your Honor, now my ascent into the ladder of the ladder in the organizational setup of the department was not that easy. It was not a better process. So many frustrations, so many denials in promotion because of my insistence to adhere to the rule of law, Your Honor, please.
So you mentioned your adherence to the rule of law, which translate to you being independent. So, can you give us another instance where you have displayed your independence, which is, of course, we all know, one of the qualities of a good ombudsman?
Now, this particular character, if I may call it character, has been depicted in the many policy issuances of the department. There have been so many issuances. If I can only cite one, like for example, the status of a dismissed elective official now who is still navigating an appeal or a remedy in the higher court, And the decision to weed him out or to remove him from office is, of course, executory as per Ombudsman's rule. But there are situations wherein positions are being referred to me citing an opposite perspective. Now, to which my only flat reply is, well, that is not what the Supreme Court has said in so many cases. And my way of just politely turning it down is just to say no. The other thing that I can still recall, Your Honor, was in situations of procurement. Now, there was a point in time where I was being prodded to sign the resolution approving the procurement, but somehow I did believe, by and large, that something was really problematic in the process. So I have to object. And without mentioning the names, I even told my boss that my future is at stake here, because even if the situation or the matter will reach a decade of time, and as long as I'm still in the government, this can still be a possible cause of my being indicted, because, or assuming that the court believes that my position is correct, that there was something wrong in the process of procurement in that instance. So I have exemplified my independence in many of the decisions that I have presented in department as part of the organization.
How about integrity, Yusek? Was there an instance where your integrity was put to test, and how did you navigate that?
Yes, in fact, now even from my colleagues, now challenges, now vis-a-vis my integrity were unfolded. Now because of some issues on promotions, some issues on disciplining them, I was able to generate I was able to generate experiences wherein they started to cast negative things. They started developing stories about me. And there was even a case that was filed against me before the Office of the Ombudsman. Now, during or at a time when the country was reeling from the effects of a global pandemic. So that was the height of the COVID period, but I really have to address that, if only to preserve my integrity, because I do believe, Your Honor, that I did not commit something improper or even illegal on that particular instance, Your Honor.
Yusek, if ever appointed to this post, do you foresee any significant change in your life or in your lifestyle? And how do you plan to cope with that?
Well, lifestyle, I cannot foresee any.
You haven't heard that you will be surrounded by bodyguards?
Well, even in the department, when I was offered a complement of bodyguards, I flatly refused the secretary at that time, because I always believe in the freedom of walking in the mall with my kids, with my children, with my family. And as long as I believe that I did not do something injurious to my fellow men, I fear nothing about something that might happen to me. But of course, the position of the ombudsman is something different from the undersecretary, because that position really can be the subject of so many threats to safety and security. Maybe I'll just address that issue if the necessity therefore comes on my way, Your Honor, please.
So how much do you value public perception, Yusek?
Well, for me, public perception is very important, but you cannot satisfy everybody. Now, as long as you believe that what you're doing is devoid of any violations or any improprieties, now I think that that is the most important aspect of my deliverable that I can offer to the public. But public perception, Your Honor, is very important to me, because that is something that the people will come to realize of what through actions that I am showing to them. So as long as I can, of course, preserve or maintain my integrity to the public, then I will not segue into any other actions that might defeat or compromise that public image that I do project to the public. And besides, myself in the community and in the office practically are the same. I don't see any practical differences, Your Honor. Yes.
How about public criticism? How
Well-
would you handle them?
Well, for me, public criticisms should be taken from the point of view of improvement. As long as it is not designed to malign you, as long as there is no intention to disparage you, as long as the criticisms is intended for a better turnaround and a better perspective for me, then I will always welcome public criticism as part of the experiences in my journey as a public servant, Your Honor.
So let us assume, Yusek, it's already 2029. So as we know, there is already a new president by then. Okay? And you were appointed, no, as the new ombudsman. So I will ask you to rank these things that I will mention, one being the most significant for you. The last one, the 5, would be the least significant. So number 1 in my list would be the president that appointed you in the ombudsman. Number 2 would be the incumbent president by 2029. The third would be the public, including public perception. Number 4 would be your the safety of your family. And number 5 would be your personal goal to help.
Well, for me, my personal goal to help the public and to assist the institution and the government in general is my top-notch and my foremost endeavor that I really would like to accomplish. Because that is the reason why I am applying for the position of the ombudsman. Now, public perception is important, but I do not rank it as the number 1 in my list. So I think it is my goal and my intention to really address the needs and the welfare of the Filipino people. That counts, all right? That counts a lot, and for me, that is the most important. Then I will also value, of course, my family's safety, because my family, we come from a very simple and normal family wherein we do not thrive in so many ostentatious or any extravagant celebrations or activities. Now, we live in a very humble subdivision, and my family is very, very simple and ordinary. Now, counting their safety for me is number 2 in my ranking, Your Honor, please. And I really have to ensure that they will not be the recipient of any negative setback out of my being a public servant, notably assuming that I would be appointed as the next ombudsman. Then, of course, the perception of the public is my 3rd in the ranking. And the president who appointed me and the new president will be ranked co-equal.
So if the evidence would warrant, Yusek, no, and you are aware that there are several persons who help you, no, get the ombudsman post, no, would you have the guts to file cases against these persons?
I just hope that the honorable members of the panel will believe in the sincerity of my advocacy and my application. I will always say yes. As a matter of fact, I have already planned a 1 year of a very busy schedule wherein I really have to concentrate on the prosecution and probably determination of cases involving high-ranking officials, those that involve or cases that border on grave violation or grave offenses, and those which involve large sums of money, because these are the pains in our neck. And sad to say, I don't have any fraternity affiliation. My only organization that I am brandishing in many of my application is the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, because that is reflective of the rule of law to which I finally accede to become a member, Your Honor. So I really don't know if the honorable members of the committee or the JBC will believe me. I can always say no as long as I believe that the institution is constitutionally independent. Because inarguably, I can always defend my position in saying no. And even under pain of being rejected or being discounted by them as their former colleagues or former friends or former associates, Your Honor.
Last question, Yusek, if ever appointed, what significant development in your life would make you decide to quit the ombudsman post?
Unless, of course, there is another round of pandemic that will take the lives of so many people. So, unless that extraordinary event like the COVID pandemic takes place, I will always maintain my advocacy of defending the office and addressing the mandate of the GRAP body, Your Honor. Please.
Thank you, Yusek, and good luck.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Attorney Firme. Our last interviewer is the Honorable Justice Jose Catral Mendoza.
Thank you very much, Attorney Marife. Good morning, Undersecretary.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Okay, I have a set of questions here from Congressman Luistro. You have been with the Department of the Interior and Local Government since 1996. However, in the personal data sheet you submitted, you did not indicate the positions you held prior to your appointment as Director 4 in 2022. May we know the nature and terms of these previous positions?
I'm sorry for that. Well, that is actually an oversight on my part, Your Honor, because when I was addressing the JBC prepared PDS, I will be very honest with you that I was at a loss because I am not a computer literate individual. I do not know how to insert an item in the box. And at any rate, in the application letter, I did disclose important matters about myself. And the Director 4 appointment that I had in 2018 was a position that entails the same job when I was appointed Director 4 by President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos in 20 and 22. It encapsulates the same job description, now mainly focusing on the legal deliverables of the department, Your Honor.
Second question, as a tenured DILG official, you are well-versed in the department's general supervision over local government officials. Could you elaborate on the nature of the cases that the DILG refers to the Office of the Ombudsman?
Well, the power of general supervision that the department exercises vis-a-vis the local government units is an authority delegated by the President, wherein we ensure that local government units and their personnel, including the elective local officials, are compliant with their duties and obligations. So it is the power of overseeing our authority to ensure that they are compliant with existing laws. So if we start imposing regulations or directives that are no longer within the confines of existing law or even the decisions of the Supreme Court, then I do believe that that is no longer an exercise of supervision. As elucidated by the Supreme Court in the case of Lim versus Drilon, now Supreme Court said that in the power of control, you lay down the rules and then you determine compliance with the rules. So you can modify, you can change, you can reverse, you can alter the decisions of the subordinate in the exercise of that control. But in supervision, that particular authority of laying down the rules is obviously missing as countenance in that ruling, because in the power of supervision, you only ensure that laws are being followed. Now, insofar as that question, Your Honor, that how do we relate this with the cases that we filed with the Office of the Ombudsman?
What are the nature of the cases? Can you elaborate on them?
Okay. Most of the cases usually involve violations, administrative violations by local elected officials. Now, in the more recent case that we filed, now, it was one that involves illegality on the part of a certain local chief executive, wherein he demonstrated negligence or absence of, negligence or neglect of duty in addressing the requirements of permits. Now, for the proliferation of a business that should have been provided with one. So we did file this with the Office of the Ombudsman. Now, and the case is still in its preliminary stage. I do recall one case involving road clearing, Your Honor. This was during the time of President Duterte, where I was also the complainant in that case. So we just formulated the cause of action wherein the local government units, through their local chief executives, now did not comply with the requirement of the laws that these public properties should not be appropriated by any other individual because they are supposed to be outside the commerce of men. So in line with the formulation then of President Duterte that we should clear all public roads or illegal structures, then we did come up with the filing of a complaint there, wherein yours truly was the nominal complainant, although in reality it was the department now which was the complainant in that case, Your Honor.
How many of these cases have been successfully prosecuted?
Well, considering that these cases were mostly admin, now the road clearing cases generated a certain degree of success. Now, there were around 97 complaints there, Your Honor, and I think some of them were granted, but the others were dismissed by the Office of the Ombudsman because of lack of evidence to comply with the standard of substantial evidence. Now, it is not actually that many, but cases that we did file generate a certain degree of success.
You said that other cases were dismissed. The question now is, what challenges or obstacles were encountered in pursuing their prosecution?
Okay, thank you very much, Your Honor, for that question. Actually, the road clearing cases were really provided me with an experience that was very difficult because I was the one who prepared all the complaints with just two junior lawyers helping me now during that time. So we were suffering from a dearth of evidence. So upon the instruction of Secretary Anyo, I went to the CIDG just to get and obtain vital documents that can help us build our course of action. So it was a gargantuan task, Your Honor, because we have to transfer from one place into another, trying to piece a substantial complement of evidence that can help us build our case against the violators of these road clearing requirements. It was a time when travel was very difficult. I just cannot recall because it was, I think, nearing the pandemic period. But the challenges lie in the gathering of the pieces of evidence, of course. Now, the other challenges lie with consisted of the logistics, because we were responsible for generating all the needed copies for the filing of the complaint. You can just imagine, Your Honor, these were all 97 cases. And with just 2 lawyers by my side, we really burned the proverbial midnight lamp, if only for us to be able to meet the deadline set upon us by then Secretary Eduardo Año to file the cases.
Do you believe the existing MOAs between the DILG and the Ombudsman are sufficient to institutionalize coordination? Or would you advocate for stronger statutory frameworks such as amendments to RA 6770 or the Local Government Code?
I am inclined to sustain the second proposition, Your Honor, but my problem there is the time element, because passing a legislative measure that will strengthen coordinative relationship between the DILG and the Office of the Ombudsman could probably take time. So in the meantime that we are still waiting for that possible legislation that can put the department in the loop of Ombudsman's trajectory of ridding the nation of corruption. Now, MOAs or memorandum of agreement now would suffice, but with the promise and the guarantee that there should be more involvement on the part of the parties to the MOA or the agreement, Your Honor. So if the MOA will only be consigned to coordination and works that can be, or works that can be done even without the MOA, then maybe a MOA with more teeth and with more participatory inclusion on the part of both parties would be all right for me, Your Honor, please.
If appointed Ombudsman, would you be amenable in creating joint task forces with other government agencies to strengthen the fight against corruption? In the same vein, how will you ensure that such interagency collaboration would not compromise the Ombudsman's constitutional independence and its exclusive investigatory and prosecutorial powers?
So on the first question, Your Honor, now having that collaborative undertaking by way of task forces for me is not, well advisable, should not be the default rule, Your Honor. Now, I believe in the independence of the office of the Ombudsman. I adhere in the powers and the capacity of the GRAP body, and given the proper direction and orientation, and of course, the sufficient number of complement, I think the Office of the Ombudsman, moving forward, is now ready to face the challenge of graft and corruption, Your Honor, please.
Last question by the Congresswoman. In 2020, the Ombudsman issued Memorandum Circular Number 1 restricting access to SALNs requiring the owner's authorization. Congress and the Supreme Court have likewise imposed restrictive measures such as plenary or en banc approval. How does the Ombudsman circular compare with these measures? Are they legally similar, or do they differ in how custodians regulate access?
I would say, Your Honor, that they are not similar. Now, the way the Office of the Ombudsman issued that prohibition in the memorandum. Now, SALN, the provision of the SALN law now makes public access to it, but with the condition that this is subordinate to the provisions of law. So I think that particular gap is very important, Your Honor, because it has somehow provided a leeway on the part of any particular agency to claim that as long as there is no definitive or clear-cut instruction from our lawmaking body, then so many interpretations are being engendered or developed insofar as this requirement of making SALN public to the people is concerned.
That was the last question of Congresswoman Luistro. I have a few questions of my own. If you could change only one law, procedure, or power to make the ombudsman's work more effective, what would it be and why?
I really intend to introduce changes in Republic Act 6770, Your Honor. Now, if given the chance to be the next ombudsman, I will make that a proposal to Congress and lead to a possible changes in the ombudsman's rules of procedures, because I do believe that some of them are no longer responsive to the fight of the agency against corruption. But if I may be given the liberty of saying to this honorable court as to what particular provision in the Constitution will I always maintain, insofar as the Office of the Ombudsman is concerned, then the provision that it is constitutionally independent is the most important endowment that our Constitution and our law has provided to the Office of the Ombudsman, because the next Ombudsman can capitalize on that in truly making the fight against graft and corruption nonsense and realistic, Your Honor. As long as we can always give flesh and blood now to this independence, I do believe that the next ombudsman is now ready for the challenge.
You mentioned procedure. What would you advocate?
Okay. I will advocate for the least resort to plea bargaining, Your Honor. Because for me, now plea bargaining is something that we should not entertain as a rule insofar as admin cases are concerned. Now, administrative cases are always imbued with public interest. It is something that we should not be compromising. Now, as long as you are guilty of an administrative malevolence, now it is my humble submission, Your Honor, that this should not be made the subject of any compromise, or even any of the elements leading to prosecution should not be the subject of any compromise, because the interest or the stake of the public is always paramount and important.
If you believe someone was innocent, but the public was demanding conviction or prosecution, how would you explain and defend your decision not to prosecute?
Now, it is very important that the next ombudsman should endeavor to have a good strategic communication perspective and ability in order to convince the public that what the ombudsman is doing is always in conformity with existing law. Your Honor, please. Now, we are resolving issues and controversies in this agency of the government, not on the basis of what the public believes is correct. We always listen to the smell and the sound of the evidence. And as long as we can justify that what we resolve is in conformity with law and reason, then I think it is not that difficult for the public to be convinced. It is just a matter of communicating with them in a style that will not antagonize the public in terms of cultural preparation, now in terms of their familiarity with the way by which an ombudsman should be operating in their lives. If I may just say one thing, I included in my long-term plan that I intend to have a trustworthy Office of the Ombudsman. My purpose there is to restore the faith and trust of the people to the Ombudsman. In fact, I have coined a tagline, OMB. Oras na para managot ka sa bayan this time. And it is not just a matter of magical expression or any other expression that we will parade to the public just because we would like to enhance now our perception or enhance their perception that we are doing our best in the government. Now, we really mean an honest to goodness advocacy here. That is why the oras na para managot ka sa bayan is something that will help the people understand that we are bringing the ombudsman closer to them, so that they can at liberty talk to the ombudsman as an agency. They can whisper to us their problems, and we can right there and then justify or dignify or give justice to whatever grievance or grievances that they would like the ombudsman to take care of, Your Honor.
You have been with the DILG since 1997, and you do agree that there is corruption in our country. What is your view of the corruption in the country? Is it prevalent or endemic?
Corruption is really it is now an endemic concern that every Filipino should confront, Your Honor. I really hate to say this, Your Honor, please, but corruption has really become a system. Now we have reached that point that people who are corrupt operates and thinks that they are not corrupt because they have been doing that regularly, with the public being not concerned in reversing their actions. So there is that kind of syndrome in psychology that if somebody believes that what he is doing is correct and repeatedly has been doing that and nobody is complaining.
To which do you attribute it? The system or the individual?
Well, initially it is the individual, but later on it should be the system, Your Honor, please. That is why the problem has become systemic. Now, it has been spawned because of poor and lackadaisical law enforcement. It has become well entrenched because of unabated patronage, political and otherwise. And the magnitude of inequality, social and economic inequality, has become so great, Your Honor, that people or the people's trust in government has been eroded or is being eroded because of these pernicious and ill effects of graft and corruption. So somehow something must be done in order to reverse this, Your Honor. Please.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary. That will be all. You're excused.
Thank you very much, Your Honors. Thank you very much for the privilege of entertaining my obligation. Thank you.